And now it was Indian money funding Indian impact. And so the global players started to think of their roles differently.
This was not the case, and there's actually a huge allyship being formed for development. And honestly, that's what we've seen, right? It's taken 8 years. Of course, there are the people that struggle to spend.
There is roughly about 30,000 crores of CSR money growing at a roughly 10-12% CAGR. 52% of the companies spend more than 2% prescribed amount. We can now tell you by district, by industry, by sector, every single data, in some sense is potentially available. They will come to us for impact. But if they come to us for impact, they shouldn't leave for compliance, because we're saying, oh, we don't know the law. We'll only help you with impact.
If a country is not thriving, there is no way a company is going to thrive. Fundamentally, first principles. And what I've seen now is that a company can look at everything around them and say, hey, am I causing this problem? Am I being impacted by this problem? Or this is an opportunity for me to actually create new value?
So we change every year, the structure, right? Because you're kind of evolving and trying to try out multiple stuff, as we go along.
Okay.
So our stake today, our current customers are corporations. Our customers are governments / NGOs / social enterprises, for profit, venture capital, private equity, individual family offices, philanthropists. So it's a spread out, and we are working on issues from education to climate to health to and we are in about 25 countries. We've delivered impact so far. 2, we are doing multiple services, from strategy to data to technology to implementation to variety. So it's a reasonable amount of multidimensionality that exists in the.
I keep the running joke I keep telling people is that I'm a CWO, which is I'm a Chief Everything Else Officer. क्योंकि like जो कुछ भी बाकी है, there were times in the discussion where we say, hey, let's put it all on the table, let's assign it to people. There are these things left. Let's take this up and run.
If you notice our logo, it's a tangram. With just 7 pieces, you can make a million combinations, and all of them will be right. And I think that defines how we also work on disagreements. It's a lot more. There are more than one way to do this.
What we have learned in our work with the government is that there is extremely good intent and serious appetite for large-scale change in the government today, right? Like when you go and meet some of the secretaries and chief secretaries or CEOs in the government, you're blown by the level of impact that they want to have.
Once my daughter said, so you're helping the person who's helping the person who's helping the actual person. Is that your job? I said, okay, that's an interesting way to ask that question. But I think that's the thing, right? Like this connecting the dots and bringing ecosystems together is the only way to do this in the urgency it needs to do. And that's the second exciting thing for me.
Okay, hello and namaskar. Welcome to The Thing with This One Is, our podcast where we dive deep into the specifics of business and creative pursuits. We discuss nuances and understand what is it that makes people drive impact. And we have with us a group of people who are not only driving impact themselves, but are also helping other people do so. We're talking about Sattva Consulting, a leading firm in CSR and impact consulting. We'll discuss with them how they started Sattva, how has it grown to such a large organization that is going global. And we'll also discuss what is it that helps them drive impact. There's a lot to learn from them, especially for people who are in influential places, whether they are corporate or not, what it takes to drive impact. So I have with me the co-founders of Sattva Consulting, Srikrishna Sridhar Murthy, Rathis Balakrishnan, and Aarti Mohan. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So nice of you to take time on Sunday morning to do this. Thank you so much. I'm a bit scared. You know why? Because I'm in a consulting firm. And, with consulting, you got to tighten your seatbelts and be prepared to get peppered with jargons. Well-oiled implementation, synergy, sustainable competitive advantage, and such things. So anyone who's watching, if they say such things, comment and tell so. Like what kind of jargons went over your head. But guys, jokes apart, let's not get involved in jargons because I'm expecting a very different conversation because you're a different kind of consulting company, right? So what is it that made you start Sattva?
Firstly, I'm great to be here. And we are a consulting firm with no consulting firm. Nobody, none of us, and nobody in our entire leadership team has any consulting background. Nobody has stepped inside any consulting organization. So we are like the black sheep of the consulting world, in some form.
Tell us a little more about yourself.
So I graduated from Pilani in 2002, like all of us, and I ended up in Dell R&D, setting up Dell R&D in India for 5 years. Got a little deep into volunteering in India and Bangalore, doing a bunch of interesting, I would say at that time, things. Then went off to do my business school in INSEAD in France and Singapore. And then kind of from there, built the idea of Sattva in partnership with everybody here. In the beginning of Sattva, also dabbled a little bit in headhunting. So I set up a business called Longhouse Consulting a little bit from 2008 to 11. And since then, I've been from 11, 12 onwards full time myself.
How about you, Rathish?
So, same year, I graduated from BITS in 2002, did my PS2, which is a 6-month internship program that we do in France at INSEAD. And as it happened, all our job offers got cancelled when we passed out, thanks to 9/11. So, stayed back at INSEAD for 2 years. Was funnily representing France in European Commission projects. Imagine an Indian guy sitting in European Commission saying, I don't speak any French, but I'm the French guy in the room. Did that for 2 years, intentionally came back to India to actually be in the impact space. But was wisely guided to join a real full-time job in SAP and do this on the side. Met Krishna, Aarti along the way, and we shared the Sattva story a bit more. So we founded Sattva in 2009. I came in full-time actually 2013. So I was moonlighting between SAP and Sattva for a bit. It's 2013.
So you're a pure Bitcoin.
No, it's great. So let's jargon. The jargon
So, similar story. I did my computer science from BITS and I didn't study after, so I'm a graduate and not a postgraduate. Pure BITSian for life. And I got placed on campus at Texas Instruments. And then I worked there in the semiconductor hardcore design space, went to Advanced Micro Devices, did the same thing. So when I came to Sattva the first time, I actually saw a graphical user interface because I was always working on the backend unit systems. So, and that's how I came along the journey. I mean, in fact, as we speak about Sattva story, it was really content writing and journalism that brought us all together in the beginning. And that was something that I was passionate about. So things tied together and then
So did you guys know each other on campus?
Yeah, of course.
we did, but we
We were
knew
both-
of each other in some. I mean, Krishna and I think we had wing friends that were common, met each other. But
yeah, we were like best friends and stuff.
She won't give bow to anybody at that.
So, that,
No worries.
we still tell people stories about how Aarti still doesn't give bow to all of us. It's not even like a big story. Yeah.
So-
Sorry.
No, I was just saying, all of Sattva's brand and Aarti's brand, right? Like always competing.
But you mentioned something about journalism that got you guys together. Tell us a little bit more about that.
so when we all were volunteering, in fact, interestingly, performing arts and journalism brought us together. We were all volunteering for different organizations during the weekends while doing our techie jobs over the week. And Krishna then started a theatre company called Version 1.0, which would stage these plays, which had a lot of audience, and then raise funds, which then would be given to NGOs. And on the side, he was doing consulting. Rathish was running a magazine at SAP. And I used to go teach kids dancing at a village from Bangalore over the weekend. And so we sort of were brought together by this theatre plus dance interest.
Aarti is a fantastic Bharatanatyam dancer, by the way. I think one of the best I have seen. So I think that was the big connection that you were talking about. You were teaching kids from rural background
Yes.
Bharatanatyam.
Yeah. Over the weekends, and then I would help them sort of, stage performances and so on. So then I started working in Krishna's productions to teach movement and dance, or even dancing myself in those productions. And then one of those cast parties, we said, there's so much good work happening in the sector, and all of us sitting here in our jobs have no idea about it. So that's when we said we'll bring together the little bit content skills we had and our interest to start a magazine called Sattva.
Oh, brilliant. So the magazine was the real beginning. And I think I read somewhere that the name of the magazine was Sattva, which led to the company being named Sattva, correct?
Yeah.
So what's the story there? If there is a story, like
Yeah, so I think as volunteers by 2005-6, you end up doing a bunch of things, from blood donation camps to taking kids to dance to do some theater to a bunch of us were teaching in school, in weekends. And then you realize at least, and I started getting a little more involved with the nonprofit leadership, and I was on the board of an NGO. I realized that there was a lot of gap in terms of execution skills of, organizations, a lot of passion. But stuff that we saw, and coming from Dell, which was so focused on execution, there was a bit of a gap, type of stuff. So we wanted to help fix that, as volunteers, and not just teach dance or theater and carry water and samosa and type of stuff, right? Do something to build organization system type of thing. So a few of us had got together to say, how can we do that in a more proactive way, kind of stuff. And that was somewhere in 2006. But as we went into understanding the NGO sector a little more, we also realized that the NGO wala feel was always there. There was a big disconnect between the mainstream and the sector.
so they were not corporatized, so to speak.
Corporate, and the stories were not coming out at all. I mean, you wouldn't see, you would always hear about ki ye nahi hota hai, wo nahi hota hai, type of stuff. Was this actually things that were working on the ground? Those stories were never. One of the interesting things in 2006, 7. One of the stories we wrote was about this fruit vendor who put a lot of his personal savings to keep a government school running, because he used to sell fruits right in front of that school. And when the funding went away, he kept the school, kind of running. And interestingly, he recently won a Padma Shri at this point. And we wrote about it in 2006-7, and in about around 9-10, I remember we used to distribute these magazines. It was PDF at that time, and it would just travel to whoever, Google groups, Yahoo groups, BITS, and any group we could send it to. And somebody from the US actually walked into our office, many years later, saying, I read this, in your magazine. I don't know how he got the forward. And he said, I'm from that small town. Do you have the details of this person? And I want to see if I can contribute a little bit, as well, right? So this disconnect between, while we were helping NGOs on their basics, whatever systems and some basic consulting, the bigger disconnect was the storytelling between the two ecosystems, right? The mainstream and the sector. So in 2006 September is when we launched our first edition of the magazine, and the magazine was called Sattva. And then when we kind of started the company, we are reasonably challenged in bringing new names together. We are not that creative when it comes to naming. So we just took the name from the magazine and put it here, and renamed the magazine to The Alternative.
Did you try a version where you took first letter of each of your names, put it together?
We tried a lot of other crazy stuff.
Let me give you the actual names we came up with, so that you know how good Sattva actually is a comparison.
Right.
He came up with Matchstick Men.
Matchstick Men. Okay.
I came up with 25th page.
25th page.
Because it's like 24 pages of the newspaper have all the news, what happens in the 25th page. Oh, like, and we came up with some odd ones. Tattva, and sounded like a restaurant. And then we said, yeah, bhai. So now ye chal raha hai. Like, this one is working. Why don't we stick with that?
Yeah.
Right? And that honestly was a good decision. And then the alternative, and actually everything that you see in this office, by the way, has been named by Aarti.
Oh.
So the alternative was named by Aarti. This room now is called Imagine, which is also named by Aarti. So for a long time, we realized that off the lot, she trusted her with the naming of everything that we.
But the last name I came up with was, we came up with a name for a tech product where I said, let's call it Shift, because Sattva Holistic Insights for Transformation. After that, they stopped asking me to name anything. That was the last name. So, and that's as jargony as it could get from here.
It's very interesting. And see, the thing is, what also is interesting to understand here is that you have the NGO space, which is very, selfless, going after a cause sort of a thing. But then you sort of set up a company, which is very corporate. You register a company, there is a board of directors, there's that, all the jing bang that comes along with it. So when did that decision making happen, that let's formalize this and sort of make a corporation out of it, or whatever it was registered as?
So 2006, 7-ish, we were mostly volunteering, right? We were exposed to the NGO sector. Also, we were volunteering from a corporate point of view. Most of us, in SAP or Dell or, Texas AMD, everywhere, Aarti worked, there was a volunteering corporate CSR type of work. And we all kind of spent time doing that. For me, the big shift happened when I went to INSEAD, right? And for the first time as an engineer, I understand economics. I started understanding microeconomics, macroeconomics, and what drives what, why is a country poor, why is a society in a certain way, and things like that. And second is, I also started seeing the whole social entrepreneurship, which was an enterprise that could create impact. And also there was a bit of pressure from the global ecosystem for the corporates to become a little better, in some sense. I had not read, but I had heard about a book called 21st Century Wealth, which also talked about how the largest shifts in society first happens with business and then everybody else catches up, right? So entrepreneurship drives change and the rest kind of catch up in some form. So that was the primary motivation at that time to say, hey, maybe we should do this as a for-profit corporate, kind of an approach, so that it's scalable. I think for us, scale was very, very important, right? Because sometimes in impact, you get very happy with doing good, and doing good even around your neighborhood keeps you satisfied. But to do things at scale is when you solve the problem. And our approach was more to say, can we solve the problem? And hence, doing it in a sustainable economics way was important. And also for the factor that part of our career, we were not funded by any of our fathers to kind of say ki, or mothers to say ki, do whatever you want in life and we'll pay for you, right? So we also had to earn a, earn a buck and living. So all of this kind of came together, and against good advice. A lot of people actually told us in 2008-9 saying, don't do this. Do not do this as a for-profit. Do not do it now. Impact is something that you first earn your money and then you come back. It's a, kind of once you are more financially stable. But to start doing it like a career, so early in life, and do it in a for-profit way when the rest of the ecosystem was predominantly non-profit, I think that was a bit of a bet. It was more based on instinct, at this point.
So eventually then it was just a very organic step to formalize this as a proper company and stuff like that.
And we registered the company, but Ram, we got to a point where we realized that this was not going to grow unless the 100% mindshare of everybody involved is going to be on it. So you can sort of build a small company, incrementally get to a place, and by 2011, 2012, we were about 8, 9, 10 people. We were doing something, we were making money, we were bootstrapped. But we realized that if you really want to move it, you have to be full-time and you have to just come in all in, both from a timeshare point of view and a mindshare point of view.
So, and you joined in around the same time when they were moonlighting, or?
Yeah, I mean, I was a new mother. And then in some sense, when this came up and I was just debating, I had a good job. But I knew that I couldn't do Sattva on the weekends, raise a child, and be at my regular job. So then it was a toss up, and I said, okay, I'll get more time with my daughter because I'll be working out of home, and I am now part of this. 2 years, let's throw in the towel and look at. And there is no entrepreneurship in the family by far. We had lawyers, media people, journalists, but nobody. And for 5 years, my parents didn't even realize, is she working in an NGO? Is she running a donation organization? They would introduce it in so many different ways. And I'm grateful for our family that came into support on the monetary side for a while, but it was really the time, right, which we had hugely miscalculated. There is social impact, but my biggest learnings came from being an entrepreneur and figuring out how to run a business ground up. So when Krishna and Rathish both joined full-time, it gave us a huge non-linear way to actually take the next few steps forward.
Very interesting point, like explaining to especially parents, what are you doing exactly? How has that question changed? Or how was that question answered when you initially started? Let's say you set up the company, you got going. Then what did you answer that question with? What were you exactly doing at that point? As a company?
We'd say that I would introduce what we did as saying that I work on social impact, but we are a sustainable for-profit company, and that would immediately be a misnomer. So my dad would say that she raises money for NGOs, and my mom would say, edo NGO mela nalla panniranga, and that's how she would tell everybody that
It's a good work that you're doing.
it's good work that we are doing. It's good for the society.
Punya ka kaam.
For sure, right? But and there would always be questions every other month saying that, but you couldn't do this on the side, right? Why is this your main? I think that's what that for the longest time people weren't very sure why this was our main thing to do. This seemed like a side thing to do, and that too, given that we were all not from the sector.
Yes.
We are not studied here. We were therefore not development professionals. We entered at a space where it was almost like a point of change for the Indian sector. And 3, we were running a for-profit company in the middle of this. So now they, they are able to introduce what we are doing much better. At one point in time, my daughter used to go around saying that, my mother is an eco warrior. If you do something bad to the environment, she'll kill you.
In some sense, different, and at least at that time we believed, this was more important and interesting, to do in the long run.
So let's talk about that. The thing about starting a company, the big thing in a consulting company is client. So do you remember the first client, or did you already have some people who were ready to pay, and therefore you sort of said that let's set this?
Like I said, we didn't come from the sector. We had to find. So interestingly, our first client, it's a very interesting story, and Udyogini is an NGO in Delhi, and they were our first client, and they had a big funder called ECO, which was a Dutch funding agency. And Dr. Vanita Vishwanath, who was the CEO of the organization, was asked to come to Netherlands to make a pitch to the donor, right? And they said, we will unlock more money for you for next 3 years, but we want you to become more sustainable because you're in the livelihood space.
As an organization. Udyogini as an organization needs to be sustainable.
Had to become more sustainable, and hence this time, instead of a proposal, give us a business plan. Right? And Dr. Vanita is she's ex-World Bank, PhD in the space, so very deep in the sector. So Vanita, came out, and she met a person who used to work at McKinsey in Amsterdam, saying, I just came out of this meeting, and he used to be a volunteer with Udyogini. And she said, hey, you must know this business plan stuff, right? And can you help me write the business plan? Because I have to now submit a business plan, not a proposal. And that guy was a Dutch guy. He said, I came to spend 2 weeks in India, so I don't know your organization or the sector deep enough to do this. But he said, recently I met a guy in my class who used to speak about all this stuff in INSEAD. Why don't I connect you to him? And he can help you out, right? And this was just 1 year after INSEAD. So one of my friends called Mark Varnoy, so he connected Vanita to me, and I get this call from Vanita saying, in a non-timber forest produce value chain working in LAC and Mohua, I want a business plan. The only words I understand is business plan. And I said, done. Kitna paisa hai aapke paas? She said 3 lakhs budget. I said, done. We'll build it. Then we haven't done it. So at that time, we used to hang out with a friend from Unitas called Neeru Maria. So I called her and said, hey, do you know how to build a business plan in rural value chain? She said, yes. Okay, great. Supply, demand, done. We paid her 1.6 lakhs. We made 3 lakhs, and, we earned our first small profit, kind of out of that. Right? So that was our first assignment. And then Udyogini became a customer for about 5 years. And from then on, many other, such networks. But it was also a bit, serendipitous. And
this was when you guys just were you guys, and Vikram Rai also at that time.
Yes. So Vikram was also at that time, part of the founding team. So till about 15, 16, he was around, and then he went on to do his healthcare stuff. And Vikram and Aarti were the early, people who came on board.
So who
with a
wrote the
small
business
team.
plan finally?
Neeru Maria. That's what I'm saying. So we got, because we didn't know how to do it. We learned in that assignment.
So there were 3 important things that are important to tell out of that story. One is Krishna didn't know non-timber forest produce. Krishna didn't also know how to do business plan, but Krishna knew a person who to do business plan. So jugadu matlab right from day one, right? But the second thing and the third thing that are very important, which defined our business, Ram, is one, we went and told her that we will not stop at giving you the business plan. Business plan is the beginning of this process, because changing into a sustainable organization is not about the plan. And I think Krishna worked with them for 3 to 4 years actually in transforming their board, showing the money, building their leadership, and that became the DNA of the organization. कि हम plan नहीं बनाते, plan कोई भी बना सकता है. We will be the ones that will help you make that plan into reality. And today, if you look at it, 70% of Sattva's business is also about making plans happen. That I think was right from the first deal was the model. Third is deep intimacy, which means that Vanita then came on board with Sattva. So she was with us at least and continues to be with us as somebody who cheers up and helps us stay on the course, etc. And we realized that if you do these 3 things, which is find a way to make it happen, build it for the long term, and make sure that you don't stop at the plan, and build deep relationships with people. That's the recipe. While so many things have changed with Sattva, these 3 things from the first deal to now, hopefully, are the same.
Wow. So it's not just you come in, you give gyan and leave, but it's like you get involved with the whole thing, see it till the end, see the entire implementation, right?
I'll tell you, everybody, and any party you go to, people will tell you how to fix the country.
Right.
There are 2 people whose expertise nobody really respects. One is teacher, another is somebody in the social sector. So सबको लग रहा है कि they can do this, right? Everyone knows how to teach and everyone knows how to fix the country. So we've realized that giving ideas is 10%, right? It's ideasforfree.com, right? Making it happen is the part that is most important. And right from the first deal to now, we go and say, I'll give you the plan, but I also want to be part of the team that makes it happen, which I think has helped us and really helped us scale.
So take an example of any typical engagement that you would have with a client, a small one to begin with, in terms of how you start, how you take it through, and how you see it till fruition, so to speak.
Let me tell you maybe the second or the third client. That's a good story, right? So waste management becomes a big problem in Bangalore. Everybody realizes it's a big issue. There is a 2-member organization, a small organization that does advocacy work in waste management that comes in and says, yeah, advocacy kar rahe hain, but problem is not getting fixed. Right. So we advise them that, hey, why don't you move away from just advocacy work to enabling people to manage waste better, where you become an organization that offers waste services.
So this is the wet and dry waste, that one?
Wet and dry waste, bulk waste generators, apartments, etc. They said, that's a great idea, but we don't know how to run this, right? Like we have never, running a services organization that collects your waste, manages it, segregates it from an advocacy body is a huge leap.
That today India's largest waste management social enterprise.
Which company is this?
There's a company called Sahas. And I think, Sahas is today one of the leaders in waste management, in the country, right? And most importantly, they've stuck to their impact narrative. The reason why they're so good is because their quality, how much decentralized waste management happens through them is just phenomenal. They're the best in the country, right? So to Rathish's point, I think, walking the talk and making it happen. Also because that's the reason we were here. We didn't know what was consulting, to do consulting. Right. We knew we came here to solve a problem. Right. So, and this was the way we figured out would solve the problem than to talk, right? So hence, and then this became a consulting kind of a model.
So was that engagement the one which convinced you that, yes, that's the right path we are on and this is what we should do more of?
I think many such examples.
So it happened very quickly, one after the other?
Yeah, and it kept coming, even me and Rathish worked on, a large skill development organization. We were coming from, at that time, we only took buses and trains. We never took flights. We couldn't afford,
which you are making up for now by taking 2 flights every week.
Kind of, right? But at that time we were, we were coming from, there was a toilet conference in Trichy, by an NGO called Gramalya. On our way back from that conference, in a sleeper bus, we both wrote the proposal for that, non-profit. That was the first time we won a deal competing against the McKinseys, the PwCs, and 11 major large consulting firms had bid, and we won. And we were like literally 15 people, 20 people team. The donor actually came to the office to check कि ये लोग really है क्या, कौन है ये लोग बोल के, right? And interestingly, at that time we used to share our office with a lingerie company, as well. Right? Absolutely, right? So the donor walked through
another e-commerce connection, by the way.
They walked through mannequins and people shouting, sizes and colors to come up, and now they're even more scared to give us the assignment because they're not sure these guys are real guys or not, and they are choosing us against, or in competition with some of the big ones. So a lot of these kind of led to us believing ki doing, is more important than just saying. But it was also important to bring the right thought process. So it's not like you can take away from the thinking part. Thinking is very, very important, but thinking alone is not.
Yeah, but I think at that time you were also kind of forming your own pitch for Sattva, right? In the sense that when you're introducing your company to a prospective client, you are putting a story together. Like, what are you? What do you do? Office space and all that comes much later. Somebody comes on visiting and all that. That's a different story. But is it that that point you start framing it all together such that now you can probably say it in your sleep? But was at the time, okay, should we say this? Should we not say this? And is that where the impact consulting thing comes in? Because that is also something that is not necessarily very well understood still. There is consulting, there is management consulting, there is HR consulting, and so on, so on. Impact consulting is something that is, in a way, not very well known. Would you agree with that? And was that the case back then?
There was a debate for the first 10 to 12 years of this company in the board around should we call ourselves consulting or not. Like 12 साल board member will come in and say हर board meeting में ये consulting निकाल दो यार, तुम consultant नहीं हो. Because essentially the notion of a consultant is the person who gives you the plan. The traditional joke is, yeah, he will take your watch, tell you the time and give you the watch, right? And our
Increase revenues, cut costs.
exactly, right? So a decision tree banao. So, and our board members are like, you're not doing that. We are actually delivering value. And how do you, and consulting was seen as a baggage. But honestly, we were already breaking so many notions that we are a for-profit organization. We are working in impact. We are a non-consultant consultant. We said, this is a category that people seem to understand. So let's move in. So I think you're right. Impact consulting at that point, and it was a category of one person, one organization. Yes. It's not like, we had peers who were doing the same thing and who were trying to get that done as well. And so there was an active debate. And Ram, sometimes it's easy to think that you made these choices very consciously and it worked. We just did what we felt was the right thing to do. Like keeping a focus on impact was the right thing to do. Not just working with people with money, but working with the people who are doing the impact on the ground was the right thing to do, which again, a lot of people advised us against. And we've said, if that doesn't get fixed, then how do you even create impact, right? So a lot of these choices were the right thing to do. And we were fortunate when we look back that they were the best decisions of running the company. And you're right that in the beginning, consulting was a category. But I think the only part of our pitch that resonated with everybody is, we will work with you long term to make whatever you're wanting to do happen. That they were willing to say, and we were also willing to tie our revenue to that, saying we will get paid if these things happen, right? Then in some sense, we were a partner who's sharing the risk than somebody who's coming and giving a plan and walk away. And it was also a refreshing pitch to somebody who's always been hearing advice from those who are not part of the sector.
So do you guys also have this similar billing structure that typically consulting firms have? One is that you charge some money upfront, so a certain amount of effort is charged, and then there is a share of whatever the plan then when it gets executed. Was it because earlier when you started, you obviously had no option. Like you said, you took equity in one company or you were taking a risk alongside the client. But now has that changed?
It has changed now because I think there's a little more acceptance of the work that we do, and I think it is still tied to outcomes, milestones, type of a thing. But there is a lot more acceptance of the kind of a role, or a value that someone like us brings to the table.
इसके लिए पैसा दे सकते हैं. It's okay.
Okay, right? In the beginning, obviously, we found it very difficult to get a combination of we will do impact plus we will pay. Dono ka combination, was a little hard in the beginning because, people who were doing impact, like Rathish said, were not, did not have the budgets at that, point in time. I think for many years in the beginning, as a company, we only ate one meal a day, right? And it was very, very hard to make ends meet. But over a period of time, the market also opened up. The CSR law came in. That was a big 2014. That was a huge game changer in the ecosystem. So lots of other things happened in the ecosystem, which we were a little bit ready for because we started kind of earlier. But I think now there's more acceptance, and the equity deal was the only one of its kind that we did. After that, we quickly realized we can't survive with future promise of money. You know, we need some combination here. But some skin in the game has always been our, you know, kind of our approach, right? And that
differentiates.
absolutely.
This is awesome. A phenomenal stories, great stuff, you know. And if you were to just summarize that entire journey from beginning to now, how would you do that?
Maybe 4 phases, Ram. So one is 2009, we registered the company. 2 of them came in full time, Vikram and Aarti, 2 of us part time. This is where we are doing the Udyogini Saha stories that we talked about, figuring our play. But at that time, we were running 3 businesses. We were running a media business. We were actually running an online magazine called The Alternative that was reaching thousands of people. We were trying to run a consulting business, and we had a recruitment business. That went on in my mind till about 2012, 2013. Few things changed at that point in time. One, Krishna and I came in full time. 2, board, which we are deeply grateful for. The Sattva board is one of the best. Came and told us that, listen, this is becoming a joke. That you guys are trying to do too many things. You've got to double down, focus on a few things, etc. And we decide to shut down our media business. We shut down our recruitment business and say that, hey, can we all come in, look at the consulting business and look at growing that significantly. And we had an executive search on the side. But it became a very B2B business because earlier we were trying to do a B2C plus a B2B to everything. B2B, that was a very important decision, and we redefined our roles. So Krishna took a lot more market focused role, I took a lot of delivery role, Aarti helped in a lot of the research work, etc. And that then coincided with the CSR law coming in 2014. And by that time, we had done this hard yards of work and we were able to tell people how impact really happens. 2014 to 17, we moved from 17 people to about 130 people. At that time, our delivery engine started to get set up. We had our services, we had our markets. Vikram moved to Bombay, somebody moved to Delhi. We started getting clients outside of Bangalore more actively. We built our delivery mechanism. 2017 was when phase 3 started, where we made a very important choice that we should not be a company that is a founder-led organization. Because then it will be collectively limited to the capabilities of 3 people. So we built a leadership team of 10 people, 9 of whom were ex-entrepreneurs, who came in and said, we will divide the team. And in order to demonstrate that we were serious about it, I was managing the whole of delivery. I was given the smallest business unit and asked to run as a peer to all of the 9 people, because we needed to convey to people that, listen, this structure is a real structure. It's not like an invisible founder circle. That went on from 2017 to 2020, but by then the team had grown, accountabilities were shared. We had a lot more people who were telling the Sattva story. And 2020, when COVID happened, most other our peers had like 2 people in the market. We had 10 people in the market, right? And the fact that we were doing implementation suddenly became so important because COVID, nobody wanted a plan. Everybody wanted action. When COVID ended, and I think we sort of got to 2023, we were 400 people. You know, and by that time we had recognized that, hey, there is the ability to sort of share responsibilities with the leadership is important. We in the process continued to refine our structures, etc. And now we have come to a point where we recognize that what we are doing through effective philanthropy is important, but unless we are able to see business as an agent of change, and unless we are actively working with government to make change happen, we are not going to scale the work that we are doing. And now I would say from 2030 onwards is the next phase of Sattva's growth, which we will talk about now, where we continue to make philanthropy effective. We want to make business an agent of change in a way that is integral to their business, and we want to continue strengthening the work that we're doing with the government.
So this is brilliant. And would you say that the 2014 CSR law was the inflection point that you guys were looking for, or it just so happened and that just gave a big fillip to whatever you guys were doing?
I would say, and Krishna and Aarti should add, but 3 things happened which I think is very important. One is the law made it formal that there is a consulting organization that can play a role in the sector to bridge supply and demand more than anything else that happened in the sector. Till then, an organization, now we became a segment and a category, and we were pioneers in that category, and that really helped, number one. Number two, more than the money that came, the fact that corporates have to take impact seriously changed the way corporates were looking at their role in this space, but also changed the way others in the sector were looking at their respective roles and how it could work. Because you have to remember, for the longest time, it was global money that was funding Indian impact. And now it was Indian money funding Indian impact. And so the global players started to think of their roles differently, right? That was the second part. And the third part, and this is really a lesson for every young entrepreneur, the fact that we did the hard yards between 2009 and 14, working with NGOs, going on the ground, fixing things, really helped, because now we were going to companies and saying, now I can actually tell you what happens. We were not one of those fly-by-night operators that saw a business opportunity because of CSR. We had just done the work to go into the room and say, hey, this will what will work. And all three things, I think, made a difference.
Yeah. So CSR law is the one which mandates companies to spend a certain portion of their profit after they meet a certain criteria on impact activities, especially social impact activities. Now, when that is happening, a lot of money is coming in, right? And I was reading somewhere that it could run into tens of thousands of crores of money, which is now available. And a lot of people don't really know what to do. Like in my own experience, I've seen that some companies, for them, this was, let HR do something about it. Okay, जाके किसी स्कूल में कुछ डोनेट कर देते हैं या whatever, and it of course has evolved over time. How have you seen that change?
Interesting. I remember 2013, 2014, I used to sit as part of so many roundtables where people would say, this is just another loophole that people will exploit. People will not do anything about it. And then you can always come up with excuses, or this is, and NGOs were like, who are CSRs to ask us questions? Of course, they don't know anything. And there was so much of a fight, and we remained the only optimistic people in the room. What if this was not the case, and there's actually a huge allyship being formed for development? And honestly, that's what we've seen, right? It's taken 8 years. Of course, there are the people that struggle to spend. There are the people that are just still HR holds the role. But I think one, it's brought in a huge amount of innovation to the space, because here are people that are thinking differently about how to spend the development money. Two, it's brought seriousness, because these are not people that came yesterday and then suddenly started doing CSR. That's much lesser now. There are professional teams led by people who've seen both sides of the coin, both the corporate side and the impact side, who are coming and leading this. They know how to work with stakeholders much more effectively, and we are seeing that there's a huge mindset to learn and grow as well. And we can see that in the number of foundations that have been started now by corporates that are going deeper into impact. So that's been a very humbling learning, and also gratifying, because we were then able to be partners for those 8 years of the journey, whatever it took. And from whichever point, I remember in the early days of CSR, we used to be involved with the government and actually doing a whole bunch of roundtables to tell people, what is the law about? How do you interpret the law? How do you execute on it? And we brought a lot of this, our learning from the execution in the early years, to say that this is not about another reporting. This is about actually doing the work, and it is not related to your business. So therefore, how can you have that, that strengthen your impact by bringing in your money, but also your resources, expertise, and the place you occupy in society to do this?
So there's two interesting parts to that, story, right, on CSR that Aarti is talking about. One, we needed data, because before it was more anecdotal CSR. The law made this more data, being available. So today we are one of the guys who bring a lot of data into this sector and to CSR in general, right? So now we know that 29,500 companies come under the CSR law. There is roughly about 30,000 crores of CSR money growing at a roughly 10-12% CAGR. 52% of the companies spend more than 2% prescribed amount. We can now tell you by district, by industry, by sector, every single data, in some sense is potentially available, kind of out there. So one was kind of to make that happen. The second is, the first few years of CSR law was very difficult because it was a law, right? And we were coming from the impact sector, right? So the first guys who landed up in the boardroom talking about, because this was a law at the board level, were not people like us. They were people who came from a compliance kind of a background, typically the big four, type of stuff. So the first phase of the law was just understand the law and, kind of spend the money, right? And many checks were written in the last week of March, saying before March 31st, before the year ends, we need to get the money out, donate to a cause, type of stuff, right? So it was not very structured. Everybody wanted to be compliance. There was one company in Delhi where a CSR manager said, "Impact karna hai, to you please come and talk to my boss, and we can probably work through the law and get your support." And when I walked in, the manager shouted at him and said, "ये किसको लेके आया? कहीं किसी को भी लेके आ जाता है," in front of my face, and asked me to get out. Right, and that guy felt bad and got me tea, that at least chai to pee ke jaiye types. So I stood there, had tea, kind of walked out. Right, today that same company chair, the chairman's office is talking to us to do a lot of work.
Wow.
The point is,
Did you meet that guy again?
not yet. I mean, because I'm sure he's kind of moved on. But the point is, early days of the law was about compliance, right? And
Checkbox.
checkbox, and it was also impact was coming later. First, it was to get your house in order. The corporates had to get their house in order, and we were not the guys who would help you get the house in order because we didn't know compliance, right? None of us came from a legal or a company secretarial background on what to do with the law type of stuff. So many companies didn't even allow us inside because we were not a big four, type of stuff. Thankfully, over a period of time, once the dust settled, people started to realize, if I'm anyway now my house is in order, and I'm able to kind of spend the money. Now what is the impact of that money is when they started to realize, you need someone like us to kind of come in that process. We also realize, if we don't speak the compliance language, we will be lost, right? People should not come to us for compliance, they should come to us for impact. But if they come to us for impact, they shouldn't leave for compliance, because we're saying, oh, we don't know the law, we'll only help you with impact. This is kind of where we start to balance out, social and business, because you also have to add value to the business, right? So that the moment we figured out that we have to create societal impact but also add value to the industry and the business and make it strategic, at the same time make it compliant, is when our journey took off. So it also, was the law, while it happened, it opened the opportunities. It's not like, hamare line lag gaya.
I think a lot of organizations have this mentality or mindset. Let's not say mentality, but the fundamental principle is that the organization or a corporation is for profit. The goal of organization is to make profit. Everything else is secondary. And this law, sort of, at least for Indian companies or companies operating in India, made it clear that it's alongside you have to do all this. Earlier days, if you remember, there used to be companies who take care of the ecosystem. Like, you talk about a township of a large company, a large factory, and they're taking care of this, setting up schools, they're setting up hospitals, and so on. So they had an impact any which ways.
Yes.
Which somehow over the last, I think maybe 80s or 90s, especially in the US, and then it percolated to India, where the aspect of there being more to this company than just making profit kind of got backseated a little bit. And then this law sort of brought it back into the forefront. And I guess, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that it also coincided with social media becoming bigger and companies seeing value in portraying this aspect of them doing something bigger than just what their stated purpose was.
Yeah.
Did that also help? Like, do they also tell you, "Oh, isko social media pe kaise dikhaye?"
Communication is a very important aspect, for anybody who's doing work. Interestingly, there was a study done, globally also on why companies do good, or what is the focus. Regulation is an important one, right? Without regulation, none of this is possible. And there's globally, regulation is evolving in this space. And now in the US, there's going to be some more impact with the changes in the US. The second is, there is a demand from the younger talent and the talent, saying, hey, if I need to be working with a company, which is kind of seen where the social media angle becomes, very, very critical. The third is that this has to drive my business risk down, because today there are a serious amount of risk that a business takes, right? In terms of, be it climate, be it societal, all of these are risks that a company is going to face. If you're in manufacturing, you're going to be, under stress. If you're in, we've all seen how the prices of chocolate is going to change because of, the raw material into the chocolate becoming more expensive. So all of that, are going to be risks that you need to kind of address. That's also a reason why you would do something in sustainable. But that in the third bucket, you're doing it because it's a business
So
imperative.
ESG also, environment, societal and governance, they are also becoming part of CSR, or that's
So these are two parallel ecosystems. They converge in some form, and this was the part that Rathish was talking about. Why CSR is philanthropy. CSR is something that you do outside of your business. Inside of your business, you have to do a bunch of things, and the two have to be in synchronization. Right? You cannot be saying, for example, that I'm very focused on being inclusive as a business outside, but not inside. You'll have to still do it more collectively across the board, but these are two parallel regulations and ecosystems, but they converge in many places, and in many organizations it's kind of has a common leader taking care of it as
If you're building on that, forget CSR, ESG, all of those terms for a second, right? And if you want to build a long-standing company that's going to stay for 20, 30 years, right, while balancing all of this, you want to look at your company and say, hey, what are external risks, right, that are going to keep my company, say, away from growth? Like ITC says this beautiful line, which actually says that there is no thriving company in a broken country, right? Like, which is a leading company in Syria? I have no idea, right? But if a country is not thriving, there is no way a company is going to thrive. Fundamentally, first principles. So, and what I've seen now is that a company can look at everything around them and say, hey, am I causing this problem? Am I being impacted by this problem? Or this is an opportunity for me to actually create new value? Just take the issue of water. Some companies are causing the problem of water. Some companies are at the risk of becoming, obsolete because of water, like plants are moving. Some companies can look at it and say, hey, this is a massive opportunity for me to create a differentiated product that actually creates new seeds, new varieties because of decreasing water. And we think that in the future, every company has to look at the external changes that are going on and say, am I the cause, am I the risk, am I the solution here? And how much they're able to engage is where regulation then helps, because regulation makes it a board conversation, a leadership conversation.
superb. And now this, we talked about how initial days and then this becoming a Philip. Now you're a big organization. The thing about running big organization is different from starting a small company, figuring things out, going organically. Now you have to set certain rules around yourself, how you operate. How do you divide work among yourselves, and how does Sattva get sort of verticalized, if you may? Is there a government angle? Is there philanthropy angle? Is there CSR angle? How do you structure it, or how do you sort of operate now that you are a significantly large organization?
So we change every year, the structure, right? Because you're kind of evolving and trying to try out multiple stuff, as we go along.
Okay.
So our
So your DNA of that initial DNA hasn't changed.
has not changed, because we are also we are also doing many things. We are not in one ecosystem, right? I mean, if you look at our website, we say making impact everybody's business. Our stake today, our current customers are corporations, our customers are governments slash NGOs slash social enterprises, for profit, venture capital, private equity, individual family offices, philanthropists, so it's a spread out, and we are working on issues from education to climate to health to, and we are in about 25 countries we've delivered impact so far. Two, we are doing multiple services from strategy to data to technology to implementation to variety. So it's a reasonable amount of multidimensionality that exists in the.
So how do you bring in subject matter expertise, because these are fairly diverse fields themselves, right?
So that's a big shift, Ram, we've done, and we're I think we're getting to the organization structure now. Firstly, we now realize that when we started, we were a bunch of generalists who learned along the way. We now, to scale in the future, need the sector has also become, in some sense, more specialized. And you need to now really solve problems. We can't keep talking about it only. And that takes depth, and some of us have built depth, but we need more, and we can't organically now keep building. We need to kind of beg, borrow, steal. We've always kind of played that game in Pilani, right? So we need to keep bringing that into the game, all the time. So if you were to actually make that happen, then expertise has to be built, partnered, or in some sense has to be put together. And for us, we also when we look at Sattva, we also realize we are not anymore one organization. We are many organizations. So that's our new structure that we are moving into, because we were doing many businesses in one entity. Now to scale, and because of the multidimensionality, it also creates the big learning in the last 2 to 3 years is that trying to manage everything at the same central level becomes also much harder. So now we are actually moving into 4 aspects of Sattva. So, our mothership, which is, the primary organization, will continue to run the philanthropy ecosystem, which includes CSR, nonprofits, government, family philanthropy, all of that stuff, global foundations and everything else. And that's been our core business, and we will continue to do that. But we've also now built a lot for the ecosystem, right? We believe consulting can only take you to a few hundred organizations every year, right? But the ecosystem is of tens of thousands of organizations or lakhs in a few places. To do that, you need to build knowledge for everybody, right? And data is very important in this sector. This sector did not use data to make better decisions. So we've done a lot of work in building open source platforms and data, where we can build capacity of small NGOs, where we can bring data. So a lot of that, is important for us to be done as a non-profit of Sattva. So we are spinning off a non-profit, a foundation version of Sattva, which will do more public goods digitally, right? We're also spinning off an ESG business, which is where it's a hardcore for-profit financial return. In impact, you're looking for social return. In ESG, you also have to deliver financial return, what's good for business, right? So that's a separate entity. And we've recently also started a impact fund, where we'll get into a proper category 2 AIF, and run an impact fund. So we are now 4 different, almost entities emerging, from a structural point of view, which I think, and each of them now specialize to do what they're doing now, and that's the way we see the future now going forward. And our ambition is quite reasonably clear about going global south, right? And from the beginning, even when we were 4 people, we kept saying we'll be global. Abhi now, we are actually making that happen in each of these, kind of geographies. So I think that's the structure in which we are now moving to, after many years of experimentation of what structure works, doesn't work. From our point of view, we all have to be flexible. See, that's the thing about, in the pack of cards, leadership is very important. But some leaders, especially at a founder level, you're like the joker card. You have to play whichever role, whether you like it, you don't like it, you specialize in it, you don't specialize in it. And we've all kind of jumped in to play roles that were required, versus only the roles that we want to play. Sometimes it's been a good mix of what we want to do and, what is required. But, I think in the last few years, we've mostly played what is required.
So somebody forced you to do something?
No, not force you to, it's what is needed, right? I mean, it's in the...
No, but did it come to a point like something happened, it's like कोई नहीं कर रहा है, ठीक है, मैं ही कर लेता हूँ. Did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, it happens all,
Yeah.
many times. So.
The running joke I keep telling people is that I'm a CWO. This is I'm a Chief Everything Else Officer. क्योंकि like जो कुछ भी बाकी है, never times in the discussion where we say, hey, let's put it all on the table, let's assign it to people. There are these things left. Let's take this up and run. And I mean, so 2 things that I want to add to what Krishna said, right? One is from a personal lens. Every time the shift happens, the first shift that has to happen is in the head of the founder. Because if you are not imagining the company you want to become, there is just no way you can run that company. And that's like a massive inception type exercise to put your head saying, okay, what do you want to be? Number one. And second is at every stage, and again, I'll credit the board for it. We had to do the structure that was right for that level of growth in the organization. Pehle nebulous tha, then we structured by our services, then we structured by the clients we went after. Now we are structuring it differently. And there's an inside joke in the leadership saying, yaar, har saal to kuch hone wala hi hai. To matlab taiyar raho to, right? But the truth is that if you want to grow at the rate that we are growing or evolve at the rate we are evolving, I think we have to change every year. There's just no question.
How often do you guys disagree? And then does the board step in and solve it for you, or how do you guys?
No, I think we are, I mean, if you disagree and commit, disagree until you can come to a consensus, always it happens.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that we equally have one eye on the outside as much as we have on the inside. And if you notice our logo, it's a tangram. With just 7 pieces, you can make a million combinations and all of them will be right. And I think that defines how we also work on disagreements. It's a lot more. There are more than one way to do this. So let's try this out. We take the risk, but we also make sure that all of the other principles that ground us, right? Like calculated risks, fail fast, be frugal in your approach, be collaborative. All of this come to the fore.
Yeah.
And if you see, it's a very intricate balance, right? Like that square is standing on the side; it's not standing on its longer any of the surfaces. And this balance is always very intricately one. And that's how we work with all of our partners inside and outside. And there's always this joke, like every year, not just does the company transform into a different entity, we also, our roles also equally transform. And so every year, so my clients will ask me, okay, what are you doing this year? Surely you'll be doing something new. So why don't you tell us what you're doing this year and start with your intro, because it'll be different, right?
So the question, what are you doing now, keeps changing.
Yeah. What am I doing? What am I responsible for? And it's in an Indian leadership podcast that I recently listened to. He made an interesting point. He said that it's easier to give up something that you don't like, but as you grow and you're a founder in a growing company, it's much harder to give up the things you like. And that's the true test, right? We've all given up things that we like doing constantly to be able to do the things that are uncertain, have to be figured out. And I think that's hugely important. And also, as founders and leaders, we have to be at the edge, right? Like where it gets less and less defined as.
No, but let's say something like the impact fund. It sounds like a phenomenal idea. It sounds very ambitious also. Now, when that came up, some of you must have said, should we really do this? Aren't we too busy with all these other things? Why should we take this up? We're not sure about the risks involved. We're not sure how it's going to shape up, how big it's going to get. Don't those kind of things happen, especially with something like this? Like, okay, let's create a fund, which is a big punt that you're taking, right?
The first thing that we need to do is to come and talk it out.
Yeah.
Because as you become a larger organization, there'll be like 10 people coming to you and telling you different stories about things. You cut the noise and just have the conversation where you make sure that you speak on the more things that matter. Like I was just telling earlier that this podcast is probably the longest we've sat together and spoken as three of us in longest.
Truly,
Right?
truly.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was maybe 2 years ago. Yeah. So I mean, we never get this time. So, but if ever there's an important choice, you call up and say, "Hey, this is coming. Are you okay? Have you thought about it?" Etc. I think that sort of structure really, really helps. And you can't predicate your trust on anything. Trust is unconditional. You can't predicate it on, "Yaar, mujhe kya mil raha hai? Tum kaise ho?" etc. And I mean, credit to Krishna, to be honest. Like he's built that culture not just in among the three of us, but also with the larger group, where you can't predicate a trust on other things. You have to trust and then work. You can disagree. That's okay. Like I once got into blows with him on something, right? But you move. That doesn't change the fact that I deeply trust him, and then we have to move on.
That will make for a good video.
Yeah. No, but I think we've also as an organization, and again, thanks to people in the leadership and the board, that there is a lot of appetite to fail, and I think we can talk about failures as a podcast for hours, I think, right? So we know, and we also kept hearing from one of our mentors saying, it's better to take a decision and then take another decision if it's not working faster. So try than keep talking about it and pondering over it, type of stuff, right? So we've built a reasonably strong appetite to fail, which is also why certain successes have come, because a lot of our peers are not trying stuff at the speed and the scale and the breadth that we are trying, because of which they're doing those siloed things, right? And we fail more, and hence we are able to kind of also build that. And for that, hence you are able to kind of say, "Achha, lagta hai kya ye ho sakta hai? Then let's try it out," type of stuff, because the upside is so high. Aarti talked about it, right? What if it works? gets us more excited than, what if it doesn't work?
Yeah, I mean, there is so much skepticism, as middle-level managers, senior managers in various places, whatever kind of organization, there is so much skepticism to take a risk, and we talked about this in the last podcast also, because we are so wary of going wrong, and that stops you. And what you talk about decisions, and, whatever you say is a good decision in hindsight. Because after you made a decision, what you do afterwards will in later on make, oh yeah, that thing was good. Good that we decided that.
One thing that Krishna said, which is a principle that we've all taken very seriously, is that he said that we are think of us as a banker and not an investor. How much ever you give back, then little bit more you can take. So every new idea that we executed was premised on that principle. It's not like upfront tumko full investment mil jayega and you can do whatever you want, and then 1 year later come and say, did it work, did it not work? Every quarter, every month. So it changed the way we did execution. Even today, I mean, 2 flights a week, but also 5 trains a week. Just yesterday we were planning a train trip to go somewhere in the field. So we are frugal, but very investing and supportive of all of these new ideas. High appetite for failure and learning from failure. I think many of us have made a career out of that, right? So
No, I mean, if somebody were to join Sattva, that's one thing they can definitely look forward to is travel. A lot of young people think, company ke kharche pe flight mein ja raha hu. So if that's an ambition. But that brings to a point. Like, you guys being together, and you talked about camaraderie and all the level of trust you guys have with each other is awesome. Obviously, it's there. And it's there for everyone to see also. But when a young person joins your company, when somebody like fresh out of college probably, or when they're looking for a job, they may not know, and most people don't know really what they want to do. What is it that drives them towards Sattva? I mean, if it's a conscious call they take, like, yeah, I want to join this company. One is, of course, you guys. They see you. I mean, maybe this podcast will get you more CVs. I don't know. but what would you say is that young audience, or the people who are in their mid-20s probably would be looking at Sattva as?
So I think, interestingly, I think there's now a lot of aspiration in the ecosystem to work in this space among young people.
The
Thanks a lot of
woke
the
thing, as they
fellowships.
call it generally?
Yeah, but there is serious amount of real aspiration to do work in this space, right? I think that for me is super exciting. The fact that young people want to do this kind of work, and not what, let's say, traditionally 10 years ago, where, let's say, tech was, the only aspirational thing to do, or e-commerce was the only aspirational. I think now sustainability is seen as a reasonably aspirational thing to do, right? I think the way we, look at it is culturally, for example, we talked about our data platform. Our data platform was born out of an entrepreneurial thought process of a non-founder, at Sattva, right? And I can give you at least 5 other examples. Our health practices are largest today. It's coming from somebody who's, has been an entrepreneur and part of our core team for years now, who's not a promoter or a founder of Sattva. So we've been a organization that also encouraged a lot of experimentation beyond founders, right? To Rathish's point of building a non-founder company was something we were very, very clear about. And that, for a young person, I hope it's more exciting, saying I can bring my ideas to create impact, with the tangram philosophy, saying I can create my version of impact, and create a more entrepreneurial kind of stuff. We do, work at the intersection of many different things, and execution is something that people do get excited by.
So let's look at the funnel of decision there. Now, let's say I'm a fresh graduate from engineering or MBA or whatever, I have a sectoral understanding or sectoral, affiliation in some sense, that I want to do something here, whether it's environment, whether it's education, and so on and so forth, something that drives me. Now, I can do that, either go to an NGO, or I can join a CSR team at a large organization, like my niece I had told you about, or I can join something like Sattva. What is it that drives somebody to come to Sattva?
Can I take it? Please. So one, diversity of context. So when you work in a non-profit organization, you can go inch wide, mile deep, and understand कि इस community में, इस sector में क्या होता है. Similarly, when you work in a CSR of a company, you understand in that corporate context, how do you get more deeper? Today, for example, if you're working in the CSR team of Sattva and you're 24, you are working with 5 companies, looking at 5 different industries and understanding how CSR in each of those 5 industries actually happens. right? Similarly, you might then come into a foundation project and then see how does EdTech work on something, right? Or you can go to like the nonprofit advisory team. 1 year they saw four, 5 different nonprofits on how they all scale. So one, diversity of context becomes very, very critical, right? Second is the choice that you make in consulting is that there is no downtime. Because no one calls me and says, "Aaj free hoon, to aa jao yaar, consultant," right? They're only going to call you when there is a real problem that they have to address in the efficient and the most effective time available. So which means that as a career, you're sort of moving from one fire to another fire to another fire, or one need to another need to another need. That builds a lot of agility around how do I switch context from doing what I'm doing right now to the next one, right? That's the second part. I think the third thing, which is probably not an NGO CSR, but for people who generally care about impact versus people who come to Sattva, see, we recognize that there is a lot of people who are going to care about impact in a way that they talk about it, they want to be aware of it. And there are some people who want to do something about it. And when you want to do something about it, you have to be aware of the constraints that stop you and the opportunity that is available. The opportunity of being at Sattva is that practically you will understand ki yaar, duniya aisa hai. This is the constraint, here is an opportunity, this is what will make happen.
All right, this is really great. Now, one of the big things that drives impact is the government itself. All of government's work is supposed to be about impact. How do you look at that?
Government is the ultimate scale multiplier. Like if even government moves an inch, the impact that it can create is way more than, let's say, 100 nonprofits becoming more effective. What we have learned in our work with the government is that there is extremely good intent and serious appetite for large scale change in the government today, right? Like when you go and meet some of the secretaries and chief secretaries or CEOs in the government, you're blown by the level of impact that they want to have. I think where we see our role is how do you cascade that at every level of the government to make something work? Because I keep telling people, every problem in the government is a procurement problem. How do you procure something without going to jail or without getting an RTI, etc.? So as citizens of India especially, right, we think government will solve every problem. What we are recognizing is that all the good ideas and the ambition, if you can get it through the system of the government, that actually is solving for 1.4 billion people across so many pin codes, that intelligence is what you have to sort of build and take, right? Because once you get through that, I can tell you government doesn't need any help. It will scale it. But to get that needle through that little hole of government systems and get a good idea to work within that, I think that is where we think the role of philanthropy or the role of somebody like a Sattva is very important.
No, and it's very important to work with the government, whether it's at the central, state, or local level, gram panchayat level for that matter. And there are so many examples that we see on a regular basis where you see sustainable impact actually. Like you talked about the roadside vendor who had that. I mean, this is an example. Now imagine a government setup enabling someone like that, right?
And the intent, Ram, to do that within the government is massive. Like we recently had a very senior bureaucrat come to our office, spend an hour here in this room, talk to us, understand our work. Like it's really nothing that he had to do. But the willingness to come halfway in that partnership and saying, hey, let's understand how this works is now there. Now, us playing the game is probably what is important.
Brilliant. I think you guys are at the cross section here. One side, you have the younger people who have the aspiration. Then you have corporates who have the money, plus also now the desire to cause an impact. And then you have the government or the agencies of the government for that matter. All of this coming together, and you are sort of at that cross section of all these ideas coming together. It is just phenomenal. What are you guys most positive about in the absolute near-term future? Whether it's your business, whether it's the overall societal impact. Let's start with you, Aarti.
Well, I work mostly with fabulous women leaders in the space and on women issues. So that's one point I want to make, saying that, the opportunity to look at women-led development and harness contributions, whether it's women entrepreneurs, women in jobs, is very vital for our economy. So it's good for business and it's good for society. And I've never met a single woman who needed empowerment. So I think it's about changing that entire paradigm to say, how do we harness half this country's energy in a way that's practical, that's sustainable, and that's exciting, and that excites me in very immediate everyday ways. And two is, once my daughter said, so you're helping the person who's helping the person who's helping the actual person. Is that your job? I said, okay, that's an interesting way to ask that question. But I think that's the thing, right? Like this connecting the dots and bringing ecosystems together is the only way to do this in the urgency it needs to do. And that's the second exciting thing for me.
You agree, Rathish?
So, I've realized doing this for 15 years that mahoul is everything now. Which is mahoul, right? Which is that you can run as far as you
Spending a
want.
lot of time in Delhi, Adi.
But it is true, right? You can run as far as you want. But if the space is enabling, then the per return on effort that you're putting in is like much higher. And there's never been a better mahoul for growth than now in India. Not just within India, but India to the world, right? Yeah. And wherever you go, right, there is a deep sense of promise. The farmer in Madhya Pradesh has a mobile app in his hand to check temperature data of heat to clarify how he has to sow his seeds. A woman sitting at home getting money in UPI and transacting on that right away, right? There are entrepreneurs who think they can dream big and make things happen. And the general, space, even outside, is of a sense of possibility on what India can do. Which means for somebody who's sitting in India, wanting to create change, you honestly don't have a better time. So the point that you made around government interest, private interest, young people coming in, funding coming in, all of that is because that the mahoul is so catalyzing. And so as an entrepreneur, you're looking at the space and saying, hey, what is the biggest we can dream of? And I don't think any constraint we have for Sattva's growth is external. All constraints are internal, right? And that's a great place to be.
Krishna?
Yeah. So I think, when we started, we were how brave, of you to quit everything and, do this type of stuff, right? Now we're hearing, oh, how smart you started so soon, so early in the game, So I think that how brave to how smart, narrative has shifted, right? For me, the biggest, hope and aspiration from an ambition point of view is to build, a global consulting knowledge ecosystem from India in a sector that's so critical and important, right? And I think a lot of the narrative about impact has been more driven by the global north or the west, where the global south has been a recipient, But I think shifting that through innovation, through technology, through knowledge, and being, a knowledge ecosystem that can, in some sense, not just solve India's problems, but via that solve world's problems, I think is the opportunity, the mahoul that Rathish is talking about, right? I think that's the excitement in the next 5-10 years that hopefully, all of us as an ecosystem can achieve.
Nice. Superb. Now, this is really inspiring. And I must say that, what you guys are saying and what I heard today, there's a lot of learning, and I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from this. Mahoul bahut acha hai yahan. I mean, and I also walked into your office, a lot of young people were there. I think out of 400, probably you guys are the oldest.
Yeah. No, more, I mean, among us also,
Anyway, but thank you so much for taking the time out. I know you have so much travel, so many different things to do, but sitting here, spending time with you guys is phenomenal for me. And lovely to have you all. So that's the thing about this, Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Fabulous.
Yep. All right. See you. Murthy, Rathis Balakrishnan, and Aarti Mohan.
Okay.
Totally forgot.
It's not the right thing to do. We were fortunate when we look back that they were the best decisions.
Keep watching for more.
For more such videos.
Like, share, just say that. Like, share,
Button dabal.
बोलो यार इनसे